Hello, dear friends. Today we will read the memoirs of a junior non-commissioned officer who served in the 13th Company of the 1st Regiment of the 3rd SS Panzer Division, Totenkopf. The memoirs of German soldiers and officers take an interesting historical point of view. With them you can learn how the army of our enemy was structured, how they got such qualified officers, and many other things. Remember to rate the video, as well as leave your opinion in the comments. Well, and we begin. In late 1941, in the Hitler Youth there was a poster. Young men born in 1923 are examined by the Waffen-SS Commission. I had a talk with a friend of mine, and of course we agreed to go there, to see if we were healthy. This morning there were about 200 people there. In the afternoon there were 27 left. The selection process was very strict. At the beginning of 1942, I got some papers by post. I was invited to join the Waffen-SS. So I signed them and sent them back. It was August 15th, 1942, when I arrived in Warsaw, in the Infantry Reserve and Training Battalion of the Waffen-SS. On the way to the barracks, we planned to explore the city, but we were met by 4 officers on the platform, so a walk around the city never happened. We lived in a former barracks of the Polish Army. There were 12 people in one accommodation. We were fed very poorly. Once we were on leave, but one comrade from Bavaria, he was the best shooter, and he was allowed to go on leave after every practice in shooting. To our questions, he replied that they, in the Bavarian forest, all had been poachers. The training was difficult, with night marches of 25 kilometers and so on. On October 15, 1942, we were lined up and loaded into a transport and we left for our division. We took the road through Belgium. We were in a freight car. There were apples being carried there before us. We ate those apples, drank some water from the locomotive, and we didn't arrive where we were taken, but in Poitiers, in quarantine. We all got dysentery. This was a former French artillery barracks. Nothing was ever arranged. There was no provision. We were literally left hanging in the air. A week later we moved on, and I arrived in Lyon, in the 13th Company. There I was trained on a light 75mm infantry gun, and also on a 150mm, a heavy infantry gun. It was all fine, but the guns were not transported by tractors, but instead right on top of our backs. This was felt especially with the 150mm guns. It was intentional. It made us grow tougher. When I first went to the toilet in the French barracks, I was shocked. There was only a hole in the floor and nothing else. That was my first contact with the French system toilets. On Christmas Eve, we were in a French bar. There was a Christmas tree, an open balcony, 3-person tables, and each table had candy, chocolates, and a glass jug of alcohol. I can't remember how I got to the barracks after that, but we were locked in the barracks after that, and we spent New Year's Eve in the barracks under arrest. Then we heard a rumor that we were to be sent to Africa. We are the Totenkopf, the Leibstandarte, Das Reich and the Wehrmacht Division Großdeutschland will march on Alexandria. But our vehicles were painted white, and transports arrived heading for Russia. The purpose was Stalingrad. I was on the last open flat car. There was a 150mm gun, and I was guarding it. It was February. The weather was cold. I was on the open flat car, and our kitchen was in the first car. It was only once during the whole way that I managed to get there. There were Red Cross field kitchens at the stations, but usually there was no food there. At Reishof, which is the border station between the General Government, Poland, and Russia, there was a field kitchen with soup made of noodles just 3 railroad tracks away from me. I asked a man passing by my platform how long it would be before we departed. He told me it would be 5 to 10 minutes. I rushed to the field kitchen to get some food. A hospital train was passing between the kitchen and our train, and by the time it passed, my train had already left. I remained half-dressed, without a belt and with a bowl of noodles. You can imagine how I felt. So I went to the station. There I was told that a train with gasoline tanks goes in half an hour. It doesn't stop, so I have to hop on a tank on the move. Then I was on a freight train, then on a flat car with anti-aircraft guns, then on a passenger train. Then I overtook an echelon of our division. There I was told where my 13th company was, and then I found my company in one village. I reported to the company commander that I had returned. He sent me to the petty officer, who scolded me badly and expressed everything to me. Either way, I returned to my company and made a vow to myself not to go farther than 3 meters away from the company. That was at Poltava. From there we were pushing on to Kharkov. We took Kharkov, and from there we were advancing on Belgorod. There we were stopped. What we didn't understand was the reason why we were stopped. We were attacking so well. We stayed there for a short time. We were sent to the rear, and I went on leave. I went home. When I returned to the unit, they sent me to non-commissioned officer school. After I finished school, I got a leave again, and on October 22nd, 1943, I was engaged. After that, I returned to the company as a gun commander. There I was a participant in a sorrowful chapter, the retreat to Krivoy Rog, then farther and farther away. During this retreat, my gun ran into an assault gun on the road, commanded by a Knight's Cross Cavalier. Both my gun and his assault gun became disabled, and we were forced to destroy them. By this time, my company was almost nothing left. There was only the company commander, and literally 2 or 3 other men. The company commander could not bring us all with him. He took our driver and told us, 3 men and me, to go to Dubasari and look for him there. We covered 90 kilometers to Dubasari on foot, in the cold, without any food. A company was being assembled there to march to the front, but we never wanted to go there, so we started looking for a place to spend the night. We managed to find a room on the first floor, right on the main street, which was unbelievable. There we used a 200-liter gasoline barrel to make a steam room, and used a machine gun barrel to dry our clothes. We were extremely dirty. We came out of the house one morning, and there was a truck with the tactical symbols of our 13th Company right in front of our house. We waited for the driver to return, but a new difficulty arose. The driver said that vehicles were inspected on the bridge over the Dniester, and that it was not allowed for soldiers to go to the rear without permission. So, we hid in the back of the truck under something that was lying there. They didn't find us, and we were back in our company. The company stayed in one village. The next day we went to Kishinev. In Kishinev we settled in a barracks, saw a performance in the theater, and the next day I was sent to Warsaw, to the officer candidate course. It was the same as usual, like marching, tactical training and learning new weapons. Then I was sent to the Junkers School in Prague. That was in July 1944. In October 1944, I was suddenly called to the headquarters, and they said that I would be sent immediately to Breslau, where 2 companies were being formed in the Infantry Training and Reserve Battalion. I went by train to Breslau. The personnel of the 2 companies were already there, but there were no guns yet. Then it was said that we would not get any guns at all, and so we gunners had to be sent on leave. Meanwhile, my bride was drafted into the army, into the naval forces, as an assistant to the headquarters, not at sea, but in Saint-Blazien, in the Black Forest. There was a famous spa and pulmonary sanatorium there, and the headquarters of the Kriegsmarine was located there, and that's where she worked. I had no decision where I should go, to Hildesheim to my parents, or to my bride in Saint-Blazien. I reached Erfurt. An air alert was sounded. We ran out of the train, hid in holes, and got under the American bombardment. There were no trains in Erfurt after the bombing, but after a while it was announced that a train was going to Mainz, so I went to see my bride. I reached Ludwigshafen, and from there I went on to Freiburg, stayed overnight, and the next morning went to Zeebrugge. The railroad was over there. It was 50 kilometers to St. Blaisien. There were no buses, so I had to go 50 kilometers on foot. It was cold. In St. Blaisien, I was very fortunate. I found a room in a hotel, and they put me on allowance in the Kriegsmarine. I returned from leave a day late, but I was told by the petty officer that I was the first to return from leave. My bride wanted me to marry her, but I said I had no desire to make her a widow very early. I was given 30 cadets, ski jägers, under my command. They used to bother the young girls in the kitchen, and I once trained them for half a night to run through snowdrifts, after which they left the girls alone. Then, as I think you know, the Russians broke through to the bridge near the train station. The highest degree of danger alarm was sounded. The entire reserve battalion was divided into companies, which were to take up certain areas of defense. My company was on the Oder at Aurest. It was on the other side of the Oder. There was no bridge there. There was a ferry. A great number of refugees were there, horse-drawn wagons, cattle, old men, women and children. We got orders to build our defensive position. At first, we were to build our defensive position on a dike on the Oder, but the dike was about 18 meters away from the river, and there were bushes and trees growing between it and the Oder. Then we constructed a position right on the bank of the Oder. I can't remember the name of our company commander at that time. He was promptly replaced, and the company was commanded by Otto Lumnius from Waldorf. The defense section we were assigned had a properly built bunker with an MG machine gun. The bunker was constructed to protect the bend in the Oder riverbed. On our right, up the stream of the Oder, there was a strip, about 120 meters, absolutely flat, with a single tree growing on it. There was a Waffen-SS company defense area behind it, and on our left, where the ferry was located, was the Wehrmacht. During the night, we sent a reconnaissance to the next village. The Russians were already there. It was not long before they were there. In a few days, they appeared in front of us, but without heavy weapons. They attempted to cross the Oder in 3 boats where it was a flat strip. We wiped them out. None of them survived. Moreover, the water in the Oder was ice cold. Those who got into it could not swim out. We lost communication with a neighboring company on the left flank one morning. We were ordered to retreat in the direction of Breslau. There was a house on our side, near the ferry, and a woman and her 3 daughters lived there. As we retreated, we asked her to go with us to Breslau, but they stayed in the house. To this day, I still think about what happened to them afterwards. Anyway, we retreated, and we had a sudden counterattack against the Russians. They were totally lost. They absolutely hadn't expected it, having huge losses. After that, our company was the Fortress Reserve. The Fortress Reserve meant that we were always going into close combat, either to counterattack the Russians who broke through, or to go on reconnaissance, or to help stabilize a section of defense, because there were so many Volkssturm units in Breslau. The most frequent area we fought was near the Gandau airport, in the Schmiedefeld city district. The Russians moved in there, because the unit under Speckmann's command had just fled from there. We counterattacked the Russians at night, but we were unable to take the whole area, because the Russians had drawn a lot of forces there. Anyway, we held that part of the city for quite a long time. There was the Gandau airport there. The U-52 planes landed there constantly, bringing ammunition and transporting the wounded. Then we were protecting Frankfurt Street. It's a very long street. At the crossroads with Piorstrasse, there was an embankment of the railroad. The Volkssturm was defending there, and the Russians captured the first 3 houses behind the embankment of the railroad. I, with 10 soldiers, was given orders to push the Russians out of there. We succeeded in that, with the loss of 1 man, but we captured a Russian anti-tank gun. We got orders to get the Russians off the Everk 41. The Everk 41 was a huge bunker complex with 2 floors, concrete walls, casemates and galleries, sheltered by trees and bushes. It was being defended by a part of the Wehrmacht. The Russians unexpectedly attacked them and captured the whole complex, except for the biggest bunker, which was still under defense by this part of the Wehrmacht. We were ordered to get them deblocked, to break through the Russians, who were about 50 to 60 men from the penalty unit. We marched over there, heavily armed, even with Panzerfausts. We split up along the front and went on the attack, throwing hand grenades and firing Panzerfausts. The Russians returned hurricane fire on us. 2 times we retreated into a large bunker and called in the fire of our artillery. We launched a final attack and the Russians threw down their weapons. We had 27 men left of us. We kept fighting about the same way. In Breslau there were large stores with food for the front and a lot of rear units. They all stayed in Breslau when it was surrounded, and we got reinforcements from there. But some of them could not know how to even shoot. One of the men in our replenishment said, "Oh my God, I'm in the Waffen-SS now. I can write my will." How come it was like that? I don't know. But anyway, it is a known fact. The Waffen-SS units were always applied where the air was full of iron. Our division was never standing in one place. We were constantly being pushed along the front. I was wounded by a fragment of shrapnel in my thigh on March 30th. I was operated immediately in the infirmary in the bunker. Without anesthesia, they made 2 incisions. I spent 1 day after the operation in the kitchen of our company, where young women worked. Nobody else was there. And the next day I was back in combat. I was wounded again in the lung on April 21st. I was taken to the infirmary, and they said that they were under fire and that I had to lie down somewhere else. I went to the sugar barn and lay there. I was lucky. I was bleeding all the time for 3 days, and all the dirt from the wound came out with it, they told me later. Then they took me to another hospital, in the basement of the gymnasium. Then a rumor came that on May 3rd we would break through from Breslau. I had someone from our company come to see me every day, and I told them to bring me with them. They did. The breakthrough was not successful, and the next day I had a slight attack of stroke. Our company held a position near the Kaiserbrücke Bridge, in the basements, and there was a convent nearby. I was cared for there. On May 6th, Breslau capitulated. There was a rumor again that if the company would not surrender in an orderly manner, led by the company commander, we all would be executed. At midnight we lined up. The young women who were in our company, in our uniforms, were put in the center of the column, and we marched. For 3 days we were led along the roads around Breslau. Then we arrived at the camp Breslau, 5 Ponds. What we found unpleasant there were the Austrians. They declared themselves independent, hung a red-white-red flag, did not stay with us in the barracks, but constructed a tent for themselves and never spoke to us. From there, 1,000 people were sent to the work camp in Breslau-Hunsweg. I was examined there. I got the 4th labor group. From Breslau-Hunsweg, 1,200 people were sent to work in Dresden, but only those with the 3rd work group and higher. I had the 4th, and I stayed in the camp. Once in the morning we were taken out of the camp under strong guards and loaded into the Russian wagons, different from ours. We arrived in Belgorod. I had already been there, to a camp that had 1,500 people in it. There again we were frisked, another time, and again a lot of things were confiscated. Now I will describe the supplies. Can you imagine, in the fall they brought cabbage on trucks. Our masons constructed stone fences, cisterns. The cabbage was chopped and pickled in them. From the rest of the cabbage, the soup was cooked for another 2 weeks. It was very smelly. The frost came very early. We lived in a dilapidated former hospital, sleeping without blankets on planks, and icicles grew on the ceiling because of our breathing. There was no heat and no stove. It was only much later that we made our own stove. We were counted each morning. There were always a few people missing. People died each night. In December 1945, we had no opportunity to bury any person. The corpses were stacked like firewood. It was only in the spring that they were buried. We had to work at the train station, at the brick factory. The guards were very nice. They had a hard time too. I also worked on the kolkhoz. Later we were sent to Kursk, and from there to Chistyakovo, to a coal mine. There I was asked if I wanted to work in a cultural group, and I agreed. We tried to do our best. We were writing and performing sketches. We, the cultural group, had to keep good relations with the commissar. Once he came to me and said, "USS soldiers are being moved to a regime camp. It is the best camp in the whole district." What I thought was that he was mocking me. We arrived at this camp, and for one thing, we didn't realize it was a camp. It seemed like a regular residential neighborhood. There were curtains hanging on the windows and flower pots. The German commandant of the camp welcomed us there. He asked, "What division?" "Totenkopf. 3rd block. You report to the petty officer there." We were at our home again, in the SS. It was the best camp of all my over 4 years in the Russian camps. We were working in the mine. The mine was 150 meters away from the camp. After our shift, the Russian shift came in. We had no guards. We took part in all the socialist competitions. For October Revolution Day, for Stalin's birthday, and the best miner competition. We were the best in all of them. We had a fantastic political commissar. He brought to us 30 women from the internment camp. We had a dance orchestra. We had a dance evening. But I wasn't at it. It was my shift. Bloody hell. And now there's a sensation. We got paid as much as the Russians. I say it again. We were paid as much as the Russians. And even more, because we were working much harder than they were. And the money used to come into our account. But we could not withdraw all the money. We had to pay 456 rubles from our accounts for the expenses spent on us in the camp. In July 1948, our political commissar, who had not had a single political training class with us, said that we should not mind it anyway, because by the end of 1948 there would not be a single German prisoner of war left in Russia. We said all right, and began to wait. It was August. Then September passed. Then October came, and we were lined up and sorted into different camps, which was the practice in all the camps in our neighborhood. At that moment, we were really afraid that we would all be executed, because he said that by the end of 1948, not a single German prisoner of war would remain in Russia. We did not work in this camp, but I had money from the previous camp in my account. I purchased food, treated my comrades, and we had a great Christmas holiday. Then I was moved to another camp. I requested to work in the mine again. Then I was sent to another camp, and there we worked in the mine again. The conditions there were bad. The camp was distant. There were no dressing rooms. We had deaths at work because labor safety was bad. Then the camp was closed down, and I ended up in Dnepropetrovsk, where there was a giant automobile factory, workshops, and machines from Germany. They treated the materials very wastefully. If they brought concrete a couple of minutes before the end of the working day, they just let it lie there until tomorrow, and it would dry out. Then it would be cracked with crowbars and thrown away. It's done. We were loading bricks, and everybody was taking 4 bricks, 2 bricks to hand, and one person was only taking 2 bricks. The Russians asked, "What's that? Why do you only take 2 bricks at a time and everybody else takes 4? He said everyone was too lazy to go twice. On December 16th, in 1949, we were asleep in a large barracks, and suddenly a whistle blew and an order to pack up. We were told that we were going home. They read out the list, and my name was on it. I was not excited, because I was afraid that things would change. I used the rest of my money to buy 2 large wooden suitcases, 3,000 cigarettes, vodka, black tea, and the like at the carpenter's shop. We marched on foot through Dnepropetrovsk. The Russian commandant of the camp was familiar with German soldier songs and commanded us to sing. All the way to the train station in Dnepropetrovsk, we kept singing one song after another, such as Wir ziehen nach England and Panzer rollen in Afrika vor, and so on. The Russian commandant of the camp seemed to enjoy it. The cars were freight ones, of course, but they had a stove in them. We were given enough food, the doors were unlocked, and we went. It was winter, but the cars were warm. We were provided with firewood all the time. We reached Brest-Litovsk. There we were moved to an alternate track, and there were 3 trains with former German soldiers already standing there. There we were frisked once again. I had a double-bottomed flask which I had stolen from the Russians. There I had a list of names of 21 comrades. I knew how they had died, but all turned out well. We were 3 days in Brest-Litovsk, and we went to Frankfurt Oder. At a freight station in Frankfurt, a little German boy with a bag came up to our train and asked us for bread. We had plenty of food still on hand, so we took him into our wagon and fed him. He said he would sing us a song for it, and sang Capri Fisher, and we all started crying. The railroad workers at the station used to ask us for cigarettes. All right. We were transported to another camp, where we were cleaned of lice once again. We were given clean Russian underwear and 50 Ostmarks each, which we immediately wasted, of course, because we had no need for them in West Germany. Each of us also got a package from West Germany. We were taken on a passenger train, perhaps even a fast one. But the railroad was a single track, and we had to wait for every oncoming train. We stopped once again right in front of some completely ruined train station, and people approached our train and asked for bread. We went on to Marienborn. It was the end there. We crossed the West German border in the morning. The Russians were there. It was a neutral strip. The Russians were saying Davai, Raz, Dva, Tri, and we crossed the border. We were welcomed. All were there. Politicians, Catholic priest, Protestant pastor, Red Cross, and so on. Here we suddenly heard a terrible shriek. As we later found out, an anti-fascist was kicked to death there. He sent many people to penalty camps. The people who did that were taken away by the police. We were in Friedland. I took a list of 21 names out of my flask and gave it to the Red Cross. I passed the medical commission. They issued me a demobilization certificate, and I got an SS stamp on it. Now I was eager to get home as soon as possible. I went to the station, got on the train, then changed trains. Anyway, on December 23rd, I was home again. I was happy. Of course, the British had wiped house clean. There were no more carpets in the house. The clothes had disappeared, and so on. But everything turned out well. I was home again. I had to get registered. It was in the city. Then I went to the Social Service Bureau. I was going to apply for a pension or allowance for my lung wound. They saw my demobilization certificate with the SS stamp and said, "Ah, the SS. Go away. We don't want to hear about you." My uncle gave me a job as a mechanic. Then I gradually became a foreman there. On December 31st, 1982, I retired. I was active in sports. I was the German Skittles champion. It was my father who made me start Skittles, although I first said that Skittles was not a sport. My father took me with him to play Skittles, and the next day, I wasn't able to go down the stairs. I was in pain. So Skittles is a serious sport. Then I was, and I still am, involved in bird breeding. I have 3 children. My first wife died, and my second wife divorced me because I had an affair with my war bride after she had her husband die. Now she is ill. She has been living in a nursing home for 2.5 years since her surgery. That is all for today. This was the end of part 2. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and support the channel by subscribing. Bye everyone. See you all again.